Book of Heaven, Volume 13, Part 2. July 26, 1921. The divine will is like water. It flows within everything, and no one can live without it. My sweet Jesus continues to speak to me about his holy will. My daughter, if the sun is the king of the universe, if with its light it symbolizes my majesty, and with its heat, my love and my justice, such that when it finds earth that does not want to lend itself to fecundity, with its burning breath it finishes withering it and renders it sterile, water can be called queen of the earth, such that, symbolizing my will, there is not one point into which it does not enter, nor is there a creature who can live without it. Maybe one could live without the sun, but without water, no one. Water enters into everything, even into the veins, into the human bowels, just as into the deep bowels of the earth. In mute silence, it does its continuous course. It can be said that water is not only queen, but it is like the soul of the earth. Without water, the earth would be like a dead body. Such is my will. It is not only queen, but more than soul of all created things. It is life of each heartbeat, of each fiber of the heart. My will, like water, flows within everything, now silent and hidden, and now palpitating and visible. Man can subtract himself from my light, from my love, from my grace, but from my will, never. He would be like someone who wanted to live without water. It is true that there might be some lunatic who hates water, but in spite of the fact that he hates it, that he does not love it, he shall be forced to drink it, either water or death. So it is with my will. Since it is life of everything, creatures shall keep it with them, either with love or with hatred. But even though unwillingly, they shall be forced to let my will flow in them like blood in the veins. And for those who wanted to subtract themselves from my will, it would be like suiciding their own souls. Yet my will would still not leave them. It would follow the course of justice over them, since it could not follow over them the course of the goods that my volition contains. If man knew what it means to do or not to do my will, all would tremble with fright at the mere thought of subtracting themselves, for one single instant, from my will. August 9th, 1921. Effects of the acts done in the divine will. Example of the machine. Continuing in my usual state, I found myself outside of myself, in the midst of a most extensive sea, and I saw a machine, and as the engine moved, water would spurt out from all sides of the machine, in such a way that, rising up to heaven, these waves of water spouted upon all saints and angels, and reaching up to the throne of the Eternal One, they poured mightily at his feet, and then descended again into the depths of the same sea. I remained amazed in seeing this, and I said to myself, what can this machine be? And a light that came from the same sea told me, the sea is my will. The machine is the soul who lives in my volition. The engine is the human will that operates in the divine will. Every time the soul makes her own special intentions in my will, the engine sets the machine in motion. And since my will is life of the blessed, just as it is also life of the machine, It is no wonder that my will, that spurts out of this machine, enters into heaven and glows with light, with glory, spouting upon all, up to my throne, and then descends again into the sea of my will on earth for the good of pilgrim souls. My will is everywhere, and the acts done in my will run everywhere, both in heaven and on earth. They run to the past, because my will existed, to the present, because it has lost nothing of its activity, to the future, because it shall exist eternally. How beautiful are the acts in my will! And since my will contains ever new contentments, these acts are the new contentments of the very blessed. They are the substitutes for the acts of the saints that have not been done in my will. They are the new graces of all creatures. Then afterwards I remained all afflicted, because I had not seen my sweet Jesus. And he, moving in my interior, clasped me in his arms, saying to me, "My daughter, why are you so afflicted? Am I not the sea myself?" August 13th, 1921. Melancholy does not enter the divine will. The divine will contains the substance of all joys, the font of all happinesses. I was feeling very afflicted, and my lovable Jesus, moving in my interior, told me, "My daughter, courage! I do not want you afflicted, because for the one who lives in my will, the smile of heaven, the contentment of the blessed, the peace of the saints, hover upon all her being. My will contains the substance of all joys, the font of all happinesses, and the one who lives in my will, even in sorrow, feels sorrow and joy, tears and smile, bitterness and sweetness, kneaded together within her. Contentment is inseparable from my will. You must know that as you think in my will, as you speak, as you operate, as you love, and so forth, as many children do you deliver to my will, for as many thoughts as you make, for as many words as you speak, for as many works and acts of love as you emit. These children multiply to the infinite in my will, and make their round throughout heaven and through all the earth, bringing new joy, new glory, and contentment to heaven, and new grace to the earth, making their round through all hearts, carrying my sighs, my moans, the pleas of their mother, mother in this case, meaning the divine will, the pleas of their mother who wants them saved, and who wants to give them her life. Now these children, birthed from my will, in order to be recognized as my children, must resemble and have the same manners as the mother who delivered them. If they look melancholic, they shall be put out of heaven, and they shall say to them, "Melancholy does not enter our dwelling." They shall not breach their way into creatures, because in seeing them melancholic, it shall be put in doubt whether they be true, legitimate children of my will. And besides, one who is melancholic does not have the grace to insinuate himself into others, to conquer them and dominate them. One who is melancholic is not capable of heroism, and of giving himself for the good of all. Many times these children remain aborted and die during labor, without coming out to the light of the divine will. August 20th, 1921. The acts done in the divine will are new heavens of love and of glory. Continuing in my state of privation and of unspeakable bitterness, my lovable Jesus came for just a little, and forming a circle around me with his arms, told me, "My daughter, daughter of my volition, I love so much the one who lives in my will, that I make myself her custody, and I keep her defended in my own arms. I am jealous that not even one act be lost, because in each act there is the involvement of my own life." The Fiat issued the creation, and from the Fiat it receives continuous preservation. If my Fiat withdrew, it would resolve into nothing. And if it remains intact, without changing, it is because it has not gone out of the Fiat. However, I have not repeated a new Fiat. Otherwise other new heavens, other new suns and stars would come out, but one different from the other. On the other hand, in the soul who lives in my will, it is not just one Fiat, but repeated Fiats. Therefore, as the soul operates in my will, I repeat the Fiat, and new heavens are extended, new suns and stars, and since the soul contains an intelligence, these heavens are new heavens of love, of glory, of light, of adoration, of knowledge, forming such variety of beauty that I myself remain enraptured. The whole of heaven, the saints, the angels, cannot detach their gaze from her, because while they are looking at the variety of the heavens that she contains, other new ones extend, one more beautiful than the other. They see the celestial fatherland copied in the soul who lives in my will. The multiplicity of the new things multiply to the infinite. How could I not keep this soul guarded and not be highly jealous of her, if one single act of hers is worth more than creation itself? In fact, the heavens, the sun, are without intelligence. Therefore they have no value on their part. All the value is mine. On the other hand, for the one who lives in my will, since she contains an intelligence, there is her will that runs within mine, and the power of my Fiat uses it as material in order to extend these new heavens. So as the soul operates in my will, she gives me the delight of forming new creations. Her acts are the unfolding of the life of my will, the prodigies of my volition, my repeated Fiat. How could I not love this soul? August 25th, 1921. The more knowledge one has about the divine will, the more value his acts acquire. I was fusing all of myself in the holy divine volition, and my Jesus told me, "Daughter of my will, the more you immerse yourself in my volition, the more the circle of your will expands within mine. It is yet true that the acts done in my will fill everything, just as the light of the sun fills the earth. However, by repeating the acts in my will, the circumference of the sun itself expands, and the soul acquires greater intensity of light and of heat. And as she repeats her acts in my will, her will remains knotted to mine as many times. And these knots make many divine rivulets flow over the whole earth that prevent the free course of justice. And yet, O my Jesus, many scourges fill the earth, such as to be horrifying. Ah, my daughter, yet it can be said that this is still nothing. And if it wasn't for these rivulets, for these knots of the human will made in the divine will, I would look at the earth as if it no longer belonged to me, and therefore I would make chasms open everywhere to swallow it. Oh, how the earth weighs upon me. But he was saying this with such bitterness as to make the stones cry. Then he added, "Every time I speak to you about my will, and you acquire new cognitions and knowledges, your act in my will has more value, and you acquire more immense riches. It happens as to a man who possesses a gem, and knows that this gem has the value of a penny. He is rich 1 penny. Now it happens that he shows his gem to a competent expert, who tells him that his gem has a value of 5,000 lire. That man no longer possesses 1 penny, but he is rich 5,000 lire. Now, after some time, he has the opportunity to show his gem to another expert, even more competent, and this one assures him that his gem contains the value of 100,000 lire, and is ready to buy it if he wants to sell it. Now that man is rich 100,000 lire. According to his knowledge of the value of his gem, he becomes richer, and feels greater love and appreciation for the gem. He keeps it in custody more jealously, knowing that it is all his fortune, while before he held it as a trifle. Yet the gem has not changed. As it was, so it is. He is the one who went through the change, by understanding the value that the gem contains. Now, the same happens with my will, as well as with virtues. According to how the soul understands their value and acquires knowledge of them, she comes to acquire new values and new riches in her acts. So the more you get to know about my will, the more your act shall acquire its value. Oh, if you knew what seas of graces I open between you and me every time I speak to you about the effects of my will, you would die of joy, and would make feast, as if you had acquired new kingdoms to dominate. September 2nd, 1921. One who goes out of the divine will goes to meet all miseries. Each additional knowledge prepares the soul for another greater knowledge. I was lamenting to my sweet Jesus because of these blessed writings that they want to put out. I felt as if I wanted to withdraw from his will. And my sweet Jesus told me, "My daughter, what is this? You would want to withdraw from my will? Too late. After you yourself have bound yourself in my will, in order to keep you safer, has bound you with double chains to its own. You have lived as queen in my will. You have accustomed yourself to living with most delicate and nourishing foods, dominated by no one, but dominator of everything, even of yourself. You are used to living with all the comforts, immersed in immense riches. If you go out of my will, you shall immediately perceive that, as soon as you go out of my will, you shall feel the misery, the cold, the lost dominion. All goods shall disappear from you, and from queen you shall become a most miserable servant. So you yourself, perceiving the great contrast that exists between living in my will and going out of it, shall plunge yourself even more into the depth of my will. This is why I say to you, too late, and then you would take a great contentment away from me. You must know that I acted with you like a king who begins to love a friend who is very dissimilar from him in status. But his love is so great that he has decided to render him similar to himself. Now, this king cannot do everything at once and render his friend like himself. He does it little by little. First he prepares for him a royal palace similar to his own. Then he sends him the decorations to adorn the royal palace. He forms for him a little army. After that, he gives him half of the kingdom, so as to be able to say, "What you possess, I possess. King am I, king are you." However, each time the king gave him his gifts, he looked at his faithfulness, and giving the gift to him was the occasion of new contentment, of greater glory and honor for himself, and of a new feast. If the king had wanted to give to his friend, all at once, everything that he gave him little by little, he would have embarrassed his friend, because he was not trained to be able to dominate. But little by little, through his faithfulness, he has become instructed, and he finds everything easy. So I have done with you. Having chosen you in a special way to live in the height of my will, I have taught you, little by little, in making it known to you. And as I kept making it known to you, I expanded your capacity, and I prepared it for another greater knowledge. And every time I manifest to you one value, one effect of my will, I feel a greater contentment, and together with heaven I make feast. Now, as these truths of mine go out, you double my contentments and my feasts. Therefore let me do, and you sink deeper into my will. September 6, 1921. As the truths are known, new union with Jesus is formed. Jesus wants to make known what his will did in his humanity, in order to constitute the new generations as heirs of his will, of the effects, of the value it contains. I was fusing all of myself in the holy will of my sweet Jesus, and was saying to him, "My love, I enter into your will, and here I find all the thoughts of your mind and all those of creatures. And I, with my thoughts and with those of all my brothers, form a crown around yours. And then I unite them together, making them one, to give you the homage, the adoration, the glory, the love, the reparation of your own intelligence." And while I was saying this, my Jesus moved in my interior, and standing up told me, "Inseparable daughter of my will, how happy I am in hearing repeated what my humanity did in my will. And I kiss your thoughts in mine, your words in mine, your heartbeat in mine." And as he was saying this, he covered all of me with kisses. Then I said to him, "My life, why do you enjoy so much and make feast every time you manifest another effect of your will?" And Jesus, "You must know that every time I manifest to you one more truth about my will, it is one more nuptial that I form between you and me, and with the whole human family. It is a greater union. It is a tighter bond. It is sharing my inheritances. And as I manifest them, I form the deed of donation. And in seeing my children richer and sharing in the inheritance, I feel new contentments, and I make feast. It happens to me as to a father who possesses many properties, but these properties are unknown to his children, so they do not know that they are children of a father so rich. Now, as the children come of age, day by day, the father keeps telling them that he possesses such and such farm. And hearing this, the children make feast and draw closer, with a greater bond of love, around the father. In seeing the feast of the children, the Father makes feast and prepares for them another greater surprise. He says to them, "Such and such province is mine," and then, "Such and such kingdom." The children remain enchanted, and not only make feast, but consider themselves fortunate to be the children of such a father. But the father not only makes his possessions known to his children, but he constitutes them heirs of his goods. The same happens with me. Up until now I have made known what my humanity did, its virtues, its pains, in order to constitute the human family as heir of the goods of my humanity. Now I want to move beyond, and I want to make known to it what my will did in my humanity, in order to constitute the new generations as heirs of my will, of the effects, of the value it contains. Therefore be attentive in listening to me, and do not lose anything of the effects and the value of this will of mine, so that you may be the faithful relater of these goods, the first bond of union with my will, and of communication with the other creatures. September 14th, 1921. Each time the soul does her acts in the divine will, she grows more and more in sanctity. Continuing in my usual state, my always lovable Jesus on coming told me, "My daughter, each time the soul does her acts in my will, she grows more and more before me in wisdom, in goodness, power, and beauty. In fact, as she keeps repeating her acts in my will, she takes as many bites of wisdom, of goodness, and so forth. And the soul grows from that food with which she feeds herself. This is why in the Holy Gospel it is written of me that I grew in wisdom before God and before men. As God, I could neither grow nor decrease. My growth was no other than my humanity, that growing in age came to multiply my acts in the supreme volition. And each additional act that I did was additional growth in the wisdom of my celestial Father. And this growth of mine was so true that even creatures noticed it. Each one of my acts ran in the immense sea of the divine will, and as I operated, I nourished myself with this celestial food. It would take too long to tell you of the seas of wisdom, of goodness, of beauty, of power, that my humanity swallowed in each additional act it did. The same happens to the soul. My daughter, the sanctity in my will grows at each instant. There is nothing that can escape growing, and that the soul cannot let flow in the infinite sea of my will. The most indifferent things, sleep, food, work, and so forth, can enter into my will and take their place of honor in it as agents of my will. If only the soul wants it, all things, from the greatest to the smallest, can be occasions to enter into my will. That does not happen with the virtues. In fact, if one wants to exercise the virtues, many times the occasion is missing. If the soul wants to exercise obedience, it takes someone who commands her, and it may happen that for days and weeks there is no one to give new commands for her to obey. Therefore, as much goodwill to obey as she might have, the poor obedience shall remain idle. The same with patience, humility, and all the other virtues. Since they are virtues of this low world, other creatures are needed in order to keep them exercised. On the other hand, my will is virtue of heaven, and I alone am enough to keep the soul, in each instant, in continuous exercise. It is easy for me to keep her up above, night and day, in order to keep her exercised in my will. You have reached the end of the Book of Heaven, Volume 13, Part 2. Fiat.